Carol Kranowitz.
Thanks. That was delicious. That's my favorite food. Okay. Here's the plan. Do we absolutely have to stop at 2 o'clock? No? We could go a little longer, maybe? Okay. I want to go through a little bit more about dysfunction, then I want to take some time to do some activities that you can do back at home. So, we are in the handout, we're on page 9. And I want to mention dyspraxia as being one of the sensory-based motor problems. Remember, there are 3 kinds of sensory processing problems. One is modulation, one is discrimination, and then there's sensory-based motor. And postural disorders are one variety, and dyspraxia is the other. Now, this is a biggie, and lots and lots of people have dyspraxia. It's the opposite of praxis. Praxis is the ability that we develop over time with much practice of living, of being able to ideate. The first thing we do is ideate, have an idea. What can I do with this? Here is my granddaughter Eden's favorite toy. She calls it her pink silk. And she comes to my house and she says, "Let's play with a pink silk, Granny. Let's make it be a picnic blanket." And we lay it down on the ground. "Let's have it be my wings. I'm going to fly. I'm going to be a bird." And she flies around the room. She has a million things she can do with this. When we are faced with something new and unfamiliar, we have to think, what is it I can do? Then the second step of praxis is motor planning. How am I going to get my body to do what I ideate? And the third thing is execution. How am I going to, not the how, but actually the doing of it. People with sensory problems have breakdowns in one of those areas or 3 of those areas. They look at something like this pink silk and they say, "I don't know, I can do that." They just drop it. They don't know what to do. Here's an example of dyspraxia that occurs for all of us. Getting into somebody else's car to drive it, and a car that you have never driven before, and you need to put on the seatbelt. Of course you're dyspraxic. You're not a magician. You don't know where that seatbelt comes from. You don't know how much tension to put into drawing it out from the frame. You don't know where the thing is over here to stick it into. You have to think about it. So you ideate. Where might it be? And think of all the senses you use. You turn your head. This is vestibular. You're changing the position of your head in relation to where it was before. You're using vision to spot the source of the seatbelt. You're using proprioception for grading of movement, for stretching your muscles. You're using your tactile sense. You're with me on this, right? You pull it across your body. If you pull it too fast, it'll come out too fast, or not fast enough, it won't come at all. Here's bilateral coordination, which is a gift of good sensory processing, where you exchange it. To the other hand, there's auditory function, because you're not satisfied until you hear it go click. You know, this is for survival. This is important. You need to pay attention to it. Okay, you drive that car a few times, and you don't have to think about it anymore. Zip, 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 you're in the car. So you're dyspraxic because it's new, unfamiliar, and complicated. In life, we hope that when we are faced with these new situations, we're going to be able to get through them smoothly with a little bumbling at first, and then we get on with it. We figure out how to do it. For people who are dyspraxic, they have problems figuring out what to do, or they can't, or they might know what to do, but they can't organize their body, or they can't complete the task. Very, very frustrating. So this child goes to the playground, there's a tricycle, and he's been on that tricycle enough times so that now he can get on that tricycle and it's okay. Another tricycle comes to the playground. It's beautiful, it's shiny, it has beautiful colored tassels. Nope, no interest. Same old will do for this child who is dyspraxic. It's too exhausting to try the new things. So we see kids who are dyspraxic. They want the same old, same old. They like the same bedtime story and the same routine and the same food and everything just the same because it's exhausting otherwise. All right, it's very frustrating to be dyspraxic. Now, you can think your way through a lot of dyspraxic things. I had this one little boy who came into my big music room where I had an obstacle course set up. And the other children could get through 10 obstacles in 1 minute. And these were, I mean, not all of them, but the nimble children. Okay, up the ladder, over the ramp, down the slide, through the tunnel, on the balance beam, up and down and all around, and they did it again and again. And this one little boy, it took him 10 minutes to do 10 obstacles. 10 times as long as the other children. After the end of the group, that group time, I asked if he could stay a little bit longer. And, of course, that was fine with his classroom teacher, so he did. And in the peacefulness of a room without any distractions from the other children, he went through that obstacle course over and over and over again. And that was lovely. I recommend if you can give the child the gift of time and let him just have more time doing something that's difficult. It's not for lack of wanting to do it that makes it hard. So that's just one suggestion I have, if you have that luxury of time. Okay, so we have associated problems. And Asperger's syndrome. Someone asked before, do kids with Asperger's have sensory problems? Yes. If you're interested in reading what it's like to grow up with it, I recommend books by Stephen Shore, S-H-O-R-E. Stephen, I can't remember the titles elude me right now, but he's written eloquently about what it's like. Stephen is going for his doctorate in music education right now. Autism, almost everybody with autism has sensory issues. Look at all these others. If you go to the classifications, the criteria that one has to have in order to be diagnosed with one of these issues, there are so many that are similar to people with SPD. For instance, oversensitivity to sights and sounds, craving movement, problems with language, speech and communication. And I wonder, this is my own wondering, we are quick in this country to diagnose children with something and then give medicine, ADD or ADHD as an example. We're quick to say, oh, this child can't pay attention, he's fidgeting all the time, he's not staying in his seat, he's driving everybody crazy, must be ADHD, let's give him Ritalin. But could it be that the reason that child is fidgeting is because the label in the back of his shirt is driving him crazy? Could it be that he's impulsive because he's always knocking down other kids' block structures, or he's racing out through the door, or he's tipping the toy box over? Could it be that behavior that looks impulsive is because he just needs something to do? He's under-responsive, he needs to have some input, or maybe he's sensory seeking and he just sees the opportunity and goes for it. If we look at everything now through a sensory lens, maybe we don't need to diagnose children incorrectly and give them a 10-year-old on antidepressants is not behaving the way we want 10-year-olds to be behaving. We want them curious and active and trying things and trying again. Obsessive compulsive disorder. If you go to the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, and you look at the list, there are lots of things there that could be sensory too. I have a friend whose 10-year-old was diagnosed with this. And what were the symptoms? Oh, definitely OCD. He washed his hands all day long. But hey, could it be he had tactile over-responsivity and he needed to get that sensation of something touching his hands washed off? Another telling sign. Before going outside, he would run around the coffee table. Definitely OCD. Could he have been looking for a nice vestibular warm-up? run, 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 like my little Sam on the tire swing. Maybe he just felt better after running around a little bit. Another definite OCD symptom, he'd go through the doorway and he'd go bang with one shoulder and bang with the other shoulder on the door frame. Definitely OCD. But wait, could it be he needed that proprioception? It felt great, that bump in his muscles and joints on one side, so why not do it on the other side? I said that to the mom. That's a little much. Good idea, but so anyway, I just want you all to be aware of this, because we don't have to go diagnosing and medicating our children if we can figure out some other thing to do with them. You have another handout that Dina put in, which is excellent. This doesn't come from me, but it's a list of language development. Look at this list. I don't want to take time with it now, but look at it when you get home. And just see, are your kids moving along in the right way? It might not be perfect. Their development might be ahead or behind in some areas, but generally you want them to be able to be in sync with other children at their developmental age. Okay, in the interest of time, we're going to move ahead. Associated problems, sleep irregularities, commonly go along with SPD. These are children who have trouble regulating their on-off buttons. They have trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, waking up. They might not be able to sleep alone. They might not be able to sleep with the light on, with the light off. They have a lot of ways of difficulty there. That commonly goes along with SPD. Digestion and elimination. The picky eater who is not eating because, like Jonathan, he can't stand anything that's soft, or like David, who liked everything mushy. A lot of children have these tactile problems. The ones who need it mushy, anything with a lump in it would alarm them. These kids often prefer the foods that are bad for them. They will, like the child who drinks a lot of milk and eats a lot of yogurt and cheese, is often the child who has an intolerance to dairy products and yet craves them. And someone explained to me it's somewhat like an alcoholic who craves the alcohol. The first sip feels good, and then the rest of it is bad for him. And if you think that your child might have this addiction, there are children, we call them addicts. They're addicted to dairy products. And when they have to have a grilled cheese sandwich, for instance, the casein in the dairy mixing with the gluten in the wheat causes something like an opiate in the brain. It bonds together chemically, and it feels so good that first few bites, and then it's disaster. The child may become very irritable, aggressive, or sluggish, and non-responsive, inattentive. There are all kinds of things that can happen if a child is having a difficulty tolerating the food he eats. What I recommend to you is take away the food that you think is the offender, and go as long as you can, go a week if you can, and then come back and introduce that food again. Okay, here's your grilled cheese sandwich. And what you will see probably is an explosive reaction, which should be indication that this is a really strong response. If you want to read about it, I recommend a very good book. It's by a pediatric allergist. Her name is Doris Rapp, R-A-P-P, and her book is called Is This Your Child? Does your child go to the bathroom frequently? Way, 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 way frequently. And is it not the way, what he produces is not what most people do? Is it more? Is it the consistency different? Is it icky, in short? Shouldn't be. How does your child smell? It's another thing. What the child is giving off gives us a big indication about what's going on inside. Children should smell sweet. If your kid has a sour smell, could be that his digestion is poor. Look at his skin. Does he have the skin that you'd expect in a 4-year-old or a 12-year-old? Or does he have very pale skin? Can you see the veins through his skin? Does he have a sheen on his skin? Does he have bluish circles under his eyes? We call those allergic shiners. Look at the skin. Look at the child's hair. Does he have what we call flyaway hair that goes off in space? Sometimes these are indications that nutrition is a problem. If I'm reaching you with what I'm saying here, and I see a lot of attentive eyes, I would suggest 2 things. One is if you have access to the internet, go to Developmental Delay Resources, and here's their website, www.devdelay.org. devdelay.org. They have a terrific website with lots of information about eating and other issues. Okay, picky eating. It can look terrible. It could just be disgusting to have the mashed potatoes touching the lettuce. It could just drive a kid crazy. It could smell yucky. The textures can be wrong. The consistency, the temperature, the spiciness, all of this can affect the child who has tactile issues or smell or taste issues, olfactory and gustatory issues. And many children have unrecognized problems with smell and taste. And, they can be doing fine at school, and all of a sudden the smells from the cafeteria come up the hall, and it can undo them because they can't tolerate the way things smell. Okay, allergies, food intolerances, ear infections. Many children who have SPD have frequent ear infections. And here's something that's interesting. When we clean up their diets and make sure that they have more fiber, more fruit and vegetables, if that's possible to get it in them, the ear infections go away. Less dairy means less ear infections. I've heard about this over and over again. And we also see high anxiety and emotional insecurity in our children. They are frequently feeling like they are no good, that they are not lovable, that they're not loved, even when they are the dearest children in the world. At the moment, SPD is not considered a learning disability. Someday it may be. It's hard to get services in schools for children who just have SPD. I've heard many parents say, okay, SPD is the kid's basic problem, but we're going to say it's autism, or we're going to say it's ADHD, because then he can get insurance to pay for some services. Someday we will get it to be acknowledged, and that day is coming closer because more and more doctors and insurance companies and educators are learning that this is a real issue. At the moment, we're very interested in finding out what's SPD and what's something else, because we treat them differently. Children with ADHD can be helped with Ritalin. In fact, I've heard we all can be helped with a little Ritalin. It makes our brains available for learning. But it does nothing for the underlying problems caused by this physiologic problem of the child who doesn't know where he is in space or can't tolerate being touched. Those are issues that can be helped by a therapist when the problems are extreme, or by us guys at home and at school. And I'm sure I'm going to get to these ideas any minute. Here's a little list that I made to differentiate children with SPD and ADHD. Children generally with SPD are clumsy. Now, some might be very agile, but generally they're clumsy. Generally, children with ADHD are very nimble. They're soccer stars. They're basketball players. They love sprints. They like that last push to the finish line, especially. Children with SPD often prefer the same old, the same tricycle, the same bedtime story, whereas kids with ADHD groove on diversity. Children, and they flit and dart from one thing to another. Children with SPD often have adequate impulse control. That means that they're not impulsive intrinsically. They may seem impulsive, but when you look at what caused the impulsive behavior, ask yourself, was it a sensory problem that caused it? How about the child who goes, and he sweeps his arm across the table and sweeps the books off the table, or the juice and crackers off the table, or whatever? Is that impulsive, or is it, I can't sit here one more minute if I don't get to move a little bit, I will go crazy? Could it be that? Could it be that somebody slammed a door and that was too much for the sensitive auditory processing and the child just had to do something? Let's look at the antecedent of behavior. What happened just before, or what's happening right now? Is it something sensory? Is that child needing to get more input because he's been sitting too long? Is he needing to get away from something that is overloading him? What is it? In research studies of children with SPD and kids with ADHD, it has been shown that kids with SPD have excellent impulse control if they're not overwhelmed by these sensory needs. And the test was telling them to press a button when they saw a circle. When they see a circle, press this button. When they see a square, press this button. And these kids would sit and they'd do that correctly. This button for a circle, this button for a square. And then they were told, okay, when you hear a bell, even if you see the circle or the square, don't press its button. Kids with SPD understood those instructions, saw the circle, heard the bell, refrained from pressing the button. They got it. They understood it. But guess what? Children with ADHD, given the same challenge, even though they were intelligent kids, had to press the button. So we have research studies like that show it's there, they gotta do it. Another difference. Children with SPD can settle down after SI. That means the kid's fidgety in his seat. He comes in. He's 9 years old. It's time to start the day at school. He can't sit down. He's feeling all over. Teacher says, okay, let's go outside and run around the playground 4 times. He runs around. He gets SI, which is sensory integration. He's breathing regularly. He's getting that nice bilateral coordination. He's using both sides of his body. He's looking afar. He's doing all these wonderful active things. He comes in, he sits down, he's ready. The child with ADHD feels wonderful too, but still can't settle down to work. The kid for whom SI has little effect in attention, he's the one with ADHD. Finally, we see children with SPD do not habituate. That means they never get used to something that's going to be bothersome for them. It's going to bother them and bother them and bother them, whereas children with ADHD do get used to things. Now I'm going to show you a little bit about a research study. Lucy Jane Miller is the name of the world's best researcher in SPD. In fact, if you have your pencil handy, her new book came out in April. Terrific book. It's called Sensational Kids. And we think of our books as being complementary for each other. She goes beyond the out-of-sync child and gives you a lot of background that she can do because she's an occupational therapist. So anyway, Lucy does this test. She has children come into her laboratory and they sit in a chair that tilts when you press a button. And she says, okay, we're going to pretend we're going up in space. You're going to hear something, see something, feel something. Okay? And the kids agree. And then these little sensors are taped to the palms of their hands over their navel, on their tummy here. And I think on their throat too. Up here. Maybe not. Anyway, at least here and on their skin here. And these are sensors, and they will register an electrodermal response, or EDR. An electrodermal response is eccrine sweat. Eccrine sweat is the kind of sweat that we all produce when we're challenged in one way or another. It's like a lie detector test. Okay, so when the kids come in, they're ready to go, and there's a little vial with wintergreen oil in it, and it's passed under the child's nose. Not touching, just passed under the nose. And it happens 10 times. And each time the child has an electrodermal response. Then there's an auditory, there's a siren. Then there's a visual, a strobe light. So you see all the senses are stimulated. The tactile one is a feather that goes walking across the child's jaw. And finally, the last one is vestibular in the special chair. The chair is tipped back and the child goes back 30 degrees very gradually and then is brought upright again. Now, typical children and children with ADHD habituate. They smell that wintergreen. The first time they're going to go, oh, what's that? Do I need to protect myself? Sweat, sweat, sweat. The second time, what's that? Oh, it's that wintergreen oil. The 10th time, big deal. And they stop producing this physical response to it. Children with ADHD respond as typical children do. Now I'm going to show you what the printouts are of 3 kinds of children who have undergone these little sensory stimuli. This is the typical response to a movement stimulus. I know this is really tiny print in your handout, but that says movement down here. The vertical lines are the stimuli. You can see they're not spaced evenly because we want to surprise the kids a little bit. All right, the typical child or the child with ADHD is moved in the chair, and it's yikes, what's that? Second time, uh-oh. By the end of it, oh, here comes that chair tilt again. This is the picture of a child with over-responsivity. This is an olfactory stimulus. This is the wintergreen. Does this child habituate? No. Every time. Now this is for smell. It could be a different stimulus. It could be riding in the car. And you say, oh, honey, we're just riding in the car, relax. The over-responsive child there's no way that child's going to relax. He's going to go, yikes, 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 yikes. Here is the child who's under-responsive, and this is an auditory stimulus. This was the siren on the radio. This child, we say of him, he never habituates because he never gets up in the first place. If you look really closely, you can see this teeny, teeny little bulge here. It's like a glimmer of recognition that something that we would all pay, if our sensory apparatus is good, we all would pay attention to it. It's the kind of sound of a fire alarm. And this kid's sitting there. So, this is to show you that children with SPD do not habituate, and it's different from kids with ADHD. This is very exciting research, thrilling research, because there are people in this world who say, oh, it's something the kid will grow out of. Well, I don't think so, if it's in his body. All right. What do we do to help? Support research. If you can, we need all the help we can get so we can do more research and convince the medical profession, the insurance profession, the educational scene, if we can convince everybody this is not a made-up malady. This is genuine, and this is an affliction. It's not... Oh, wait, I'm going to correct myself. By malady, I don't mean that it's an illness. We don't say that this is an illness. Dr. Ayers called SPD, or she called it SI dysfunction. She called it an indigestion in the brain. And medicine isn't going to fix it, so I take back the word malady, but it is definitely a problem. Don't wait. If I'm talking to you and you're wondering what to do about your child, don't wait. If this problem is getting in your child's way of functioning in daily life, or if it's getting in your way. Some children who are under-responsive, for instance, it doesn't bother them, but it might bother you big time. Don't wait. Early prevention really matters. And while you're waiting for professional help, you can do plenty of things at home or in the classroom. And I'm going to squeeze some in. Occupational therapy is what I always suggest is the best kind of therapy. There are other therapies too. The ones in the darker print, physical therapy, speech-language therapy, vision, auditory therapy, and nutritional therapy, I recommend because they will make a significant difference. And we don't hear a lot about nutritional therapy, but We are what we eat. And if your child is one that I mentioned who is limiting his diet, if he has a narrow range, if he's not getting those minerals and vitamins that we are naturally supposed to eat, we're supposed to be vegetarians, I guess. No, not necessarily. I guess we're supposed to be carnivorous. But anyway, these kids are omnivorous, rather. Our kids choosing their special narrow diets, the little bite of chicken here, or the lots and lots of bread and lots of dairy. We need to help them branch out, or else get supplements to give them their bodies the nourishment, because they're not going to develop well if they don't get zinc and magnesium and potassium and the other vitamins and minerals they need. And the other therapies that are mentioned here are also useful sometimes, but the physical ones I would go to first, the ones that help the child's body. Here, if you have access to the internet, sensoryresources.com has a wonderful list of conferences to attend and publications. The Out of Sync Child, that's my website, and I'm having it revitalized as we speak. And here's Dev Delay again. If you have questions about your child's nutrition, vision, movement, any kind of cognitive or physical or emotional development issues, you could go there and put in what you want into the search, and you'll be able to get a lot of wonderful information. SI Focus magazine, a new magazine, it's in its second year now, and it's great. And these are articles by adults with sensory issues, by therapists, by parents, by people who've worked with people with sensory issues or have them. It's issues of lots of articles are about children, but it runs the gamut. Go to spdnetwork.org for any of your questions on research. A very, very fine place. It would be a dream if your schools could screen children for sensory issues. We do that automatically for hearing and vision. You do that here in the... Okay. Wouldn't it be nice if we could test them for another developmental ability? So vision, hearing, and sensory skills. Because we can spot problems in very young children, and then we can address them. Make time for hard work, vigorous play, and open-ended fun. And we've got to find time in the day for things like simple roughhousing, for playing horsey, getting down on the floor and letting a kid ride on your back, for rolling across the floor like hot dogs, for jumping on the mattresses, for swinging. If you can get a chinning bar in your doorway and let a child just pull up and down like this on the chinning bar a few times. That is very useful. And here, I recommend you go here to playawaytoy.com. They sell something called the Rainy Day Indoor Playground Set, where there's a chinning bar that requires no hardware. It stays up in the doorway through tension, and you can hang a weight up to 400 pounds. So you can get several people on equipment that hangs from these bars. I have 3 of them in my home, and there's a hammock, there's a platform for swinging, there's a glider, there are different kinds of swings. They have a toddler swing or baby swing for a very small child. Just wonderful. All right. These are some ideas of what you can do in your home. And finally, I want you to think abilities, not disabilities, because of the strengths of our children are so great. They're courageous, they're funny, they're smart, they're sensitive, they're loving. These are my favorite children in the world. All right, we're going to do a little activity now, because so lots of times when I talk to teacher groups, they say, oh, well, I don't have time. And I have a daughter-in-law who is, she's taking time out now to be with her children, but when she was teaching elementary school, she'd say, "Can you give me some ideas to help get the kids who are fidgety?" And I would say, "Yeah, do something like stretch your vowels." And she would say, and I'm going to show you this. And she would say, "Oh, I can't do that because I would never get the children back again once I got them out of their chairs." Now, she's my daughter-in-law, so, I have to be really careful, but I want to show you this, and you tell me that this is not educational. You can't tell me that. I'm going to show you the vowel A, and then I'll ask you to join me, and we'll do all the vowels together. So here's A. You start kind of slumped over like this, and you lower your voice, and then you go, A. And you may see this little A? See the little A over my head? A. And it's better if you're on your feet. So please stand. Okay, so you tuck your chin down, and you're going to, you bend over, and as we go through the vowels, we're going to get lower and lower and lower. You can start really low if you want to, but I won't overtax you at first. Here we go. We're going to belt it out. A. Very good. And your voice was low and your body was low. That was very good. Okay. E. Now, E is pretty hard to do. If you're not wearing high heels, you might be able to make a capital E like this, although I don't do this with children. This is way too hard. I do a lowercase e. Do you see it? Okay. So we start down here. You can bend your knees a little bit now and lower your voice, and here we go with E. E. Good. Okay, I, and we're going to bend down a little lower. I. Good. O. We can throw in Y. Y. Good. And then my favorite is U. Now, I want you. We're not going to go down and up with our bodies, although our voice will go you. But this time we're going to turn to someone in the room that you'd like to get to know better, and it can be one or two people. Go ahead, turn toward somebody else. All right. And we're going to start with our hands at our, in yoga they call it the heart center. Your hands are here over your heart. And our U is going to come from our own body and go out horizontally toward the other person or persons. Okay, and then back again. So our voices will rise and lower, although our bodies stay put. Look to your new acquaintance. And you don't have to touch this person, okay? Okay, here we go. All right, we're going to do that again. Did you get it? We're going out, and you could, if you'd like to, you could take a step toward that person and come back again. Okay? Go get it, and then bring it back. Here we go. Good. Okay, you can sit down. Thank you. Thank you. I like that one. I like anything that I call a twosie. A twosie is so helpful for children with sensory issues when relating to other people is difficult. Having friends is difficult. And so we need to start with the simplest, which is one other person who they can do some activity with. And this one is a beaut. Okay, let's... got your hand out here. Let me just tell you quickly. Page 16, and the next pages, which are numbered 2, 3, and 4. Look at, these are characteristics. If you're not familiar with my book, this is the sort of thing that is in my book, The Out of Sync Child, and you can study these later. If you look at these lists and you find yourself saying, that's my kid, that's my kid, that's my kid, that's my kid, we're talking sensory processing disorder. If you go down these lists and nothing seems to be ringing true to you, perhaps you can rule sensory issues out and go on your way in your journey to see what problems might be. We're going to skip the cartoons on 20 because I do want to get a few activities in. Page 21, another thing for you to look at home. I encourage people to put obstacle courses together for their kids. They're a lot of fun, and these are just some suggestions for getting it started. And then we're going to spend the rest of our time on page, first we're going to go to 23, and then we're going to come back to 22. Okay? Now, in your pink bags, you have plates. Take out one plate, and I'm going to go at least till 2:15. So, okay? Is that all right, Dina, if I go over? Okay. All right, one paper plate. Everybody have a plate? Everybody have a pen? Okay. Here's what we're going to do. And I'm going to give this to you, Rabbi. Could you play, when I tell you, could you put on number 1 on that track? Okay. Here are your instructions. I'm going to see if I can do it once, but if I need to repeat it, that's okay. I love you anyway. Please draw a picture on the plate of an experience you had as a child that you like to think about now that you're an adult. So this can be an experience you did many times. It can be an experience you had once, but it pleases you to think about it. And I'm going to give you just 1 minute to draw. And you don't have to show it to anybody if you don't want to. And we're going to listen to some music by Robert Schumann from Scenes from Childhood. So start drawing. Even if you don't hear the music, start drawing. Yes, thank you. Sure you could draw all day, but all right. Now, would somebody stand up in a beautiful, or not? Yes, a beautiful voice. Stand up and tell us what your story in a sentence or two. A microphone. Okay. All right. Will somebody tell us? Yes, here's one, Dina, right in the front row, in the brown crocheted top.
Hi, everybody. This is a memory that really makes my heart pound with excitement every time I think about it. When I was 12 years old, I really wanted a desk of my own. I should stand up.
Stand up, yeah. And you have 20 seconds to tell us this story.
Oh, okay. I didn't expect to be doing this. I was 12 years old and I really wanted a desk of my own. And I came home from school 2-3 days after my birthday, and sitting in the driveway of my house was a beautiful brand new desk for me. And it was such a surprise, and it was so unexpected. And every time when I try to think of a way to make my children happy, I think of something that they really want, and I try to surprise them the same way.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. It's very emotional. Thank you. Okay. Another experience from childhood? Oh, here's one.
I grew up in Israel, and outside our apartment building was old fields open fields, and when the flowers would bloom, we would go and we would get the stem of one flower, and we would make many, many little flowers on that one stem, and we'd make ourselves head we'd put on our heads. And I'm a great lover of nature and flowers and.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I have an activity like that to talk about too. That's lovely. Does anybody have in the back? There's one. Okay.
I had a very simple memory, but I just have great memories when I was about 6 or 7 playing hide and go seek on the block with the neighborhood kids, and it was just great.
Great. Wonderful. Perfect. Does anybody have a tree experience? Oh, do you mind coming back this way one more? Dina, I think, had a tree experience.
My exercise for the month.
Yes, good.
Every fall, my father would take me on a leaf walk in our neighborhood park that had a path. It was very isolated, full of trees and leaves, and it was an annual event. And it's something that I try also to replicate with my children, taking one at a time to do something in the outdoors. I think it's very meaningful.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, those are just lovely. And I know that the rest of you have beautiful experiences too. And even without hearing from you, I can tell you what you have. Your experiences are sensory rich. They are something that made a huge visual impact on you, like coming home and seeing your desk in the driveway, or collecting leaves and making decorations for your hair, or playing hide and seek, or whatever you were doing. It was something where you were involved. You knew that something was happening that meant something very good to you. Many of you were moving in this activity, or smelling, or tasting, or seeing something really dazzling, or hearing. I'll bet some of you have some tree climbing experiences. That's why I ask about a tree, because I'll bet some of you remember being up on a tree and climbing out on a branch a little bit beyond where you had been the day before. The things that you don't put on your plate are things that are not sensory rich. So you never would tell me in your plate story about a really boring teacher you had, who never let you fiddle with anything, or never let you hold things or try things, who just talked and talked and talked. Nobody ever draws a picture of watching television, because instinctively, when we think about our childhood experiences, that kind of thing is not sensory rich. Very few people even put a picture of reading down, because you're not so much of an agent when you're reading. Now, sensory rich is probably true for everybody. Another thing is you felt safe. In that picture that you drew, you knew you were with loving people, or at least they weren't a danger for you, but probably they were loving. Some of you may have drawn pictures of being by yourself, and that's okay. Maybe at that point, being alone was the loveliest thing you could do. You felt safe enough to try to do something a little bit more challenging than you had done before. Another thing I know about your pictures, there's no time on them. They are open-ended experiences. You were doing something for the pleasure and experience of doing it. No one was saying, all right, it's time to stop what you're engaged in, come back inside, wash your hands, we're going to eat. Or, we have to go off to this lesson or that, or go get a haircut. No, you were just doing it and doing it until you were done. Now, I want you to think about these things when we think about the kids that we're concerned about. Do we give them these opportunities to have sensory-rich experiences that are open-ended in safe environments? I think safety is not a problem with you guys, because I know how loving and family-oriented you are, and you are here for your children. But do we have sensory-rich experiences enough? And that is a big question in a city community. I know playgrounds are not ample here as they are in other places. We have to kind of make it up. So I'm going to show you some things that we can do at home that work. Now, I've got a few that require some volunteers, and I would love to have a few volunteers. Think about it for a minute. I'm just going to tell you a few activities while you're thinking about being a volunteer. We're on page 23. I've arranged this chart to start with the first column has the sensory domain. Then the second is the activity itself, then what simple props you need, then some music. And listen, if you're interested in any of this music, you can get it from sensoryresources.com. And finally, what are some of the skills? Inherent in all of these activities is that they will improve praxis. They're going to help children ideate, come up with new ideas, motor plan, which is figuring out how to act on their ideation, and help them with the execution, because the more you do things, the better you are at executing your plans. They also help with modulation. They help children who are over-responsive could kind of repress the things that bother them. The children who are under-responsive become more alert. They're good for everything that ails you. Another point I want to make is that these are activities for all children. If you have a family with 8 children and you have one with sensory issues, this is not just for that child. This is for the whole family. Okay? So, tactile. Clothespin togs, that's taking clothespins and picking up pretty ribbons and scarves and things with a clothespin, and taking, I wonder if I brought a clothespin, I don't see one right here, but taking things smaller than this and sticking it on another person. And you take a few ribbons and you take a few clothespins, and pretty soon you've got someone looking just beautiful. This is what I call a twosie. And then the other person gets a turn to pick up clothespins and stick pretty ribbons all over the first person. It doesn't always work with a child who's over-responsive, that he wants ribbons all over him, but he does get the experience of handling the ribbons and doing it on the other person, which is a start. Feely shapes, that's making some spaghetti and giving everybody 2 or 3 strands of spaghetti, that's all. And you sit them at a table, and their job is to push the spaghetti around, not sticking their hands into a pot of icky, gooey, worm-like spaghetti, but just pushing it around a little bit with one finger is a nice entree for the child who's over-responsive. If he's interested in it but still doesn't want to touch the spaghetti, you can try vinyl gloves. I want to do everything I can to bring children to the table. I don't want anybody to say, "Ooh, I hate that kind of thing," because kids don't hate this kind of thing. There's a reason that they're not participating, and often it's tactile. So here, give them gloves to put on. If the hand can't get on that glove easily, cut the fingers off, and you've got something called a finger cot. A cot is like a glove for one finger, and then that finger can go into the spaghetti. You could put messy play into Ziploc plastic bags, and a child can still finger paint through the plastic. His hands don't get gooky, and then it's fun. You know, you can poke it, you can smear it, you can write in it. You get a lot of interesting feedback, even through the plastic. Shoebox path. That's where you take shoeboxes and you fill each one with a different medium that's interesting to walk on. Cotton balls, styrofoam packing peanuts, marbles, pecans in the shell. And I do not recommend rice or sand, because those are devil to clean up, and they're also get between the toes and everything. Isn't that tall? Yeah. Okay, and then the job is you lay these boxes out, and children walk from box to box. Okay? Motor planning is involved here. They've got to figure out how to balance and get one foot from one box to the other. If the child needs a little boost to be motivated, you might, this is a nice one to hook into the kid's special interest. So because a lot of our children have some specialties, have you noticed? Thomas the Tank Engine, does anyone here have a railroad fan? Or the planets, or baseball, or, I knew a little child who knew everything in the entire world about electric fans. Doesn't matter. Even if it's boring to you to hear about it anymore, it's interesting to the child. You love the child, therefore it's interesting to you, right? So, okay, this is where Stegosaurus lives, and you could have this be the cave for the Stegosaurus. Okay, this is where, it doesn't have to be dinosaurs. It can be Bible stories. It can be something that feeds into what the child's learning at school or at home. And have him go from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob and visit them in the shoebox paths. Then you can intersperse the boxes with interesting materials, velvet, fake fur, corrugated cardboard, a cab driver's, this is a nice one, a cab driver's back rubber, the things with those little wooden balls that roll when he moves. That's really fun to walk on. Okay. Barefoot, with shoes on, it doesn't matter. You still get a lot of input through your feet. Nature bracelet, that's like your idea of being in Israel and collecting the flowers or going on nature walks. You take masking tape, make an inside-out bracelet on it, so the sticky side is out, and go out with your child and just bend over, pick things up, put them on the bracelet. Typically, children will say, okay, I'm done, after putting 2 or 3 twigs or petals on their bracelet. And the tendency for an adult is to say, oh, but honey, you've got 6 more inches to fill up. But remember, this is the child's bracelet, not yours. If he's done, he's done. You take it off, you save it, and of course he'll say, may I do another one? And of course, he may. And then you take them home, put them on the refrigerator, open them up, stick them on the refrigerator, and then you've got something you can talk about for weeks. Remember where we were, where we found this? And this is funny. My sister, whom I'm going to see this afternoon, she lives on West End Avenue in Manhattan, and I was test driving all of these activities that are in the Outer St. Child Has Fun a few years ago, and she was visiting me. I live in a suburb. We don't have sidewalks right outside of Washington. And I said, come on, we're going to go make nature bracelets. And she said, what is it? Suspicious. And I said, we're just going to collect these lids. We're going to bend down, pick things up, put them on our bracelets. And she says, I don't go outside and bend over and pick things up off the street. And then I had to remember, she lives on West End Avenue. I wouldn't do it there either. But I told her it was safe. Anyway, we went out. And, she's in her 60s, and she was having a ball. We came home, and when we were little girls, we used to pick up those maple seeds. Some people call them helicopters. We called them Pinocchio noses. And, you open them up. She came home, and she had 3 of them on her nose here. And she's a grown-up. Okay, I want to show you some proprioceptive activities, and this is where I'd really love to have a few volunteers. Could I have 3 or 5 or 6 volunteers up here? And we're going to do a few things with some music.